that was seen as a breach point. And so these three factors changed the conversation in the United States a little bit, but moreover, it changed American culture when it came to looking out at the world. Before 2001, it was the very small groups on the fringes that didn't like the American position in the world. With those decisions that were made in 2001, it steadily crept towards the center. And by the time we got to the debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump over who was going to be president in the last round, the entire Democratic establishment and the entire Republican establishment was openly debating how to dial back America's role in the world. And without America in the world, there is no global system. Some countries have seen this coming and are preparing for what's next. Most have just assumed that the Americans are just going to continue what they've been doing for the last 70 years because it's what they've been doing for the last 70 years. And those are the countries that are going to be facing the greatest shocks moving forward, because they're going to come out of COVID and it's going to be over and they're going to have no idea what to do. They need a border structure that prevents invaders from getting to them. They need naval access that allows them to access the wider world for trade in order to prevent other people from coming to them. They need a stable demographic structure that allows them to generate sufficient investment to fund their system, but also sufficient consumption to make it sustainable. They need access to resources, whether those resources are food supplies or energy supplies. China, on every single measure, falls flat. It just sucks. Their borders are open. Their coasts are not indented. They don't have any good ports that are natural. Their coasts are paralleled by the first island chain, which is peopled by hostile forces. So even today, with the 40-year naval buildup that we've seen out of China, they still can't penetrate the first island chain. They might be able to take Taiwan in a fair fight. Who fights fair in war? The one-child policy, 40 years on, they've run out of people who are aged 35 and under, so consumption-led is impossible. They've got a huge population that's moving into mass retirement. And say what you will about the Chinese when it comes to ethics, I don't think they're going to liquidate their retirees, so they're going to have an Italian-style pension crisis on top of everything else. What growth we have seen out of China that might be sustainable, and that is stretching the definition of the word sustainable, is export-driven. That requires access to a global market, which they can't guarantee. They can't even guarantee their own supply lines within the East Asian sphere, much less reach the Western Hemisphere or the far side of Asia. In addition, last I looked, despite all of the fluff and fury to the contrary, this is still a fossil fuel-driven world. The Chinese get 85% of their energy from other continents. And the oil is probably the biggest problem. Most of that comes from the Middle East, which means it has to sail by Iran and Pakistan and Sri Lanka and India and Myanmar and Thailand and Indonesia and Singapore and Vietnam and Malaysia, and in many cases, Taiwan itself. And that assumes that nobody with a navy gets in the way like the United States or Japan. This is not simply a weak country. This is a country that could only exist in a very specific moment in time. When the Americans are providing global strategic cover, there's a global demographic moment that wants a lot of consumption, and no one that is a traditional foe of China is allowed to do anything. And that's where we've been since 1990. It's the world's oldest and fastest aging demography. Consumption has been flatlined now for almost 20 years. It's difficult to develop islands. It's difficult to even imagine Japan being able to be self-sufficient in food and energy is just hilarious. However, to counter all of that, they've got a couple things going for them. First of all, their cities are on the first island chain as opposed to the mainland, so they face the deep blue. They don't have to worry about any other country constraining them. And they have the world's second most powerful expeditionary navy, complete with 2 fully functional supercarriers, something the Chinese don't have at all. So if it ever did come to a fight between the Chinese and the Japanese wouldn't attack the mainland. Why would you do that? That would be stupid. You interfere with their shipment far from shore where the Chinese can't do anything but issue protests to the UN. In fact, you send one flotilla down to the Indian Ocean just to cut the energy supply line, and that's it. The lights go off in China in less than 6 weeks. It's not a fair fight at all. And one of the really perks that the Japanese have figured out how to deal with their advanced demography is they find countries with consumption-led demographics to invest in. Build where you sell. It's not just a catchy slogan. It's a national security strategy, and it works. Well, there's no way that this is going to be 100% salvaging, but the Japanese have been very aggressive, very forward thinking about establishing relations with various American areas. They're very active in Texas and the American South in particular, so that gives them a certain degree of political influence. They've been working very aggressively with the Indians, the Southeast Asians, and the Mexicans as well. Not all of those are going to turn out in the long run, but all of those are consumption-led economies with